East, I did want to talk about Sam Darnold and the Jets because it's getting to be about that time where trade talks are going to be coming in for certain quarterbacks, and trade phone calls rather, are coming in for Sam Darnold. Joe Douglas, general manager for the New York Jets, acknowledged as much that he is getting calls about Sam Darnold. And now the media is going to rehash a question that we've been asking for pretty much an entire year at this point. It's like, is Sam Darnold the guy in New York? Is Sam Darnold going to be the guy moving forward? Should the Jets trade Sam Darnold? What should they do? They have the number 2 overall pick in the draft. A lot of people think that Zach Wilson is going to go to the Jets at number 2. And really, it just revolves around what the Jets do Sam Darnold at this point. And by the way, the Jets are going to take their sweet ass time with this. They are going to take so long because as soon as they do something with Sam Darnold, that is going to tip their hand as to what they're going to do in the draft, and that's going to tip teams off, and that's going to either artificially increase the value of a trade from the number 2 pick, or that's going to decrease it depending on what they do. So I would be surprised if Sam Darnold gets traded. Right now, I think he would be traded probably maybe up to even the moment before the draft starts, because the Jets don't necessarily want to tip their hand in that fashion. But back to the question, what should the Jets do with Sam Darnold? And I don't actually have any notes here. Now, normally I do my research before the show. I've said that a couple times on the show. I've got notes to kind of help me through the segment, or my thoughts leading in, and maybe some stats and some research. I have no notes for this segment. And that's because I genuinely don't know what the Jets should do with Sam Darnold. And I was hoping that I could talk it out and figure out how I feel, just artificially and naturally, about what I think the Jets should do. And my initial gut reaction, my initial gut feeling is you should keep Sam Darnold and you should trade away the number 2 pick. There's 2 philosophies when it comes to rebuilding. It's either you find the quarterback and then you build around the quarterback, or you find the team first and then you find the quarterback. It's an either-or situation, and depending on how you feel about Sam Darnold, there are some people that are incredibly high on him. There are some people that think that Sam Darnold is not that great of a quarterback. I have seen enough in watching Sam Darnold over the last 3 years to see flashes of brilliance among the dumpster fire that has been the New York Jets over the past 3 seasons. So from a talent perspective, I'm taking a look at somebody like Zach Wilson or Justin Fields and saying, well, you can really only go sideways. It's not like Sam Darnold has proven enough to prove that he should be the starting quarterback. But in that same breath, Zach Wilson or Justin Fields or whoever, or Trey Lance or whoever you would draft in that number 2 slot, they absolutely haven't either. And, it's all about, analysis and watching game film and trying to put X's and O's together as to comparing quarterbacks in the draft to quarterbacks that are already in the NFL. But again, I've seen enough from Sam Darnold in the 3 years that I've been watching him play football to say that kid can be special with the right situation. And it begs the question if the Jets are still the right situation, because sometimes a change in scenery is all you need. I think a change of scenery, especially in Jared Goff's case, going from LA to Detroit, might be good for his career. And a part of me thinks that the same might be the same for Sam Darnold. If he wants to stay in New York, all the power to him. But if I were Sam Darnold, I'd be sick of New York and I'd want to try someplace else. And it really, again, begs the question on what the Jets are trying to do. Do they want to get their team first, or do they want to get their quarterback first? And I would argue that they already do have their quarterback, and they would probably be beneficial to the Jets organization if they trade that number 2 pick and get more draft capital, trade back, and then pick up some pieces along the way. Could you imagine Becton and Penei Sewell on opposite sides of the line from each other? That would be probably one of the best offensive line in the league at that point. If you want to get a weapon for Darnold, like Devonta Smith, or if you want to get an edge rusher, or do you want to get Kyle Pitts at number 2? Although I think tight end at number 2, even though Kyle Pitts really isn't a tight end, he's a wide receiver in a tight end's body. I feel like Kyle Pitts would be a decent pick as well. So, just talking it out, I really feel like the best thing that the Jets could do is sit with Sam Darnold, try not to trade him, maybe do a little bit of smoke and mirrors and act like you're going to trade him, and once teams realize that you're not going to trade Darnold, then you could start fishing out for that second overall pick. Because again, as I said at the beginning of the segment, the Jets are not going to do anything right now. I think it would be stupid if they tried to make a move at this moment. It would definitely tip their hand as to what they want to do with that number 2 overall pick. And trust me, if you don't tip your hand and you finally announce that, hey, we're going to stick with Sam Darnold right before the draft, the asking price for that number 2 pick is going to absolutely skyrocket, as opposed to what that pick's value would mean if you had it and you made a deal right now. So, talking myself through it, I don't think that the Jets trade Sam Darnold. It really depends on what Sam Darnold is feeling as well. I'm sure they're having talks internally with the organization as to what Sam Darnold would want. He's only 23 or 24, but again, as I made the comparison to Jared Goff, sometimes a change in scenery can be good for your career, especially in a place that's been stagnant. And, at this point, I'm really hedging bets that it was an Adam Gase problem instead of a Sam Darnold problem. And the good thing, and the other thing that I've kind of neglected until this point, is that the Jets have the cap space to actually be able to do both. ¿Por qué no los dos? Why not do both? You can draft a quarterback at number 2 and also keep Sam Darnold on the roster at a $9 million cap hit, and have some competition and see what kind of move that you have. You have the cap space to be able to afford that one season of Sam Darnold at a $9 million cap hit before deciding whether or not you want to move on, and maybe you trade him next year. That's also a thought, and that's a thought that I had in the back of my head, but I was kind of neglecting that thought, is that, again, the Jets have the cap space to be able to sit there and say, okay, we have the cap space to take a $9 million cap hit for Sam this season while we draft his potential replacement at number 2 and just have that quarterback competition and see where the chips fall at this point. Because again, I think Adam Gase was a ginormous problem in New York, and if you take a look at the Ryan Tannehill effect of what Adam Gase was doing with Tannehill in Miami, Tannehill looked like he was regressing. He goes to Tennessee and he has near comeback player of the year / MVP, not MVP caliber seasons, but he has extremely good seasons for Tennessee. Adam Gase obviously was in New York. Sam Darnold looked like a wreck at times, so again, I'm banking more so on the fact that it was an Adam Gase problem as opposed to a Sam Darnold problem. The Jets aren't going to do anything right now. They don't want to tip their hand as to what they're going to be doing or what they're going to want to do at the quarterback position for the value of that number 2 overall pick. And I think there's a good reality, and it could be a smart financial decision. I know spending money seems like a smart financial decision, but regardless, my point being, you take that $9 million cap hit, you also draft a quarterback number 2, and then you see how the chips fall where they may. But I think as I say that out loud, it's like, man, that would be cool, and financially you could do it, but wasting a number 2 overall pick on a quarterback, but also keeping the quarterback that you already had, just damages the rest of the team, where you could draft a position player like Devontae Smith or Penei Sewell to help out the football team overall. So those are the kind of options that are on the table for the Jets at this point. Again, I think that the Jets probably don't trade Sam as much as they are taking phone calls about Sam. They're not going to do anything now to drive up the price of the number 2 overall pick. And if I were the Jets, I would trade that number 2 overall pick, get some more picks later in the draft, and load up on talent. The Jets are in a pretty interesting situation. Let's see what happens to them there. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching this segment from the Hard Headed Sports Podcast. You've heard what I've had to say, now I'm interested to hear what you think as well. If you enjoyed this highlight from the show and want to watch more highlights from the show as they come out after the show's completion, you should definitely subscribe to the YouTube channel, and if you're interested in listening to the entire show in its full-length entirety, you should follow the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Anchor. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you all very soon.